Hello.
Hello.
Here we are, St. Patrick's Day 1992 in Sarasota, Florida. Mom's visiting from up in the cold north. Ken and Annette are downstairs, and Mom's running back and forth, and we're having a good time. And we're going to find out about Mom's background, her past, her childhood, etc. So, I guess we have to begin at the beginning. You want to give me your full name, please?
Olive Westhues. Olive Conran Westhues.
Okay. Where were you born?
I was born in Montgomery County, Missouri, 1902.
Okay. And how long did you live there?
I lived there until I was 8 years old, and on my 8th birthday, I was on a train going to Colorado with my parents to make our home.
Well, let's go back to Montgomery County, and you must have started school there.
I did.
Okay.
Started school
Do you
there.
remember the school?
Yes, I went to Pine Hall School, and it was a school that was taught by my mother's cousin, and she had also attended that school many years before.
Uh-huh. And were you a good student?
She boarded with us, and yes, we were good friends, except that one time we made a snowball and put it in our desk to keep it from melting, and was too close to the stove. So that time I think maybe I got a switch or two.
Do you remember the schoolhouse?
It was a one-room schoolhouse that had a water bucket in the back where everybody drank out of the same dipper.
And did you make good grades?
I think I did, yeah, then.
Okay, you were still pretty small when you left Missouri. And could you tell us why you left Missouri?
My mother had had pneumonia twice, 2 years in succession, and she was very frail. And her illness had been, her cough had been diagnosed tuberculosis. They call that TB now. And the only remedy at that time was to go in a high and dry climate. And because she had a school friend in Colorado, they decided that they would go there rather than Arizona. So that's why we went.
And you remember the trip?
Yes, I remember some of it. It was my birthday, I remember. And in those days, there wasn't much of a diner on the train, so at least we didn't go to the diner. My mother packed a lunch, and I remember a man come through the coach with Fig Newtons, and I think they're still sold, aren't they?
Oh, sure.
And Papa bought Fig Newtons for us.
And that had a lot of nourishment in it. And how long was that train trip? Do you have any idea?
I can't remember the length of time. I know we got to Colorado Springs in the morning about 10 o'clock.
Hold on a second. All right, you're arriving in Colorado Springs. You remember your first impression?
I don't remember much about it. My mother's friend met us there in a streetcar. It seemed to me like that's all he had. He'd come over on a streetcar. And we got on the streetcar and went over to Colorado City. That's a little town between Colorado Springs and Manitou. And that's where their home was. And I remember going into their place, and they had a little bed of pansies out in front of the house. And if I had seen pansies, I couldn't remember them. And I thought they were the most beautiful things I had ever seen. And then I think Papa and Mama went inside and were talking to their friends all about the folks back home, I guess. And they sent us kids outside to play. And it was at that time that it seemed to me like there was something big and dark hanging over me. And I didn't realize what it was. And until now I know that that feeling was a little bit like we were scared. It was the mountains, Pikes Peak. Pikes Peak.
So you were kind of filled with awe.
I was.
And how long did you stay in the town then?
We lived there. Papa rented a house about a block from the Parker's place, and I think we lived there until the next spring.
Mhm.
And then he developed a cough himself. He was delivering coal, and he worked at the Golden Cycle Mill, and that was a place where the gold that was mined in Cripple Creek was brought through the mountains to Colorado Springs to be smelted. And he worked there a little while, but he developed this cough, and they were afraid of TB, of course. And Papa had always farmed, so he began to look around at farming opportunities. There were not very many, but there was a few. The homesteads, the land east of Colorado Springs had just been opened for homesteading. This was in 1910. And most of the available land that was close to the springs, up close to the springs, had been already squatted on by speculators. And it was unavailable unless you could find someone who did not want their claim, and you could buy their squatters' rights, which Papa did. That's how he bought the squatters' rights from a man by the name of Dixon. And after I made my first communion in the church there, that was the time that we were moving out to the country, out to the homestead. It was about 25 miles east of Colorado Springs.
And do you remember what was the acreage of that place?
320 acres, a half section of land.
And do you know how much you paid for it, for these rights?
I can't remember. I think it was less than $50. I'm not remembering.
My goodness.
I think it was less than $50. And I believe the reason that it was available, or that he could buy it, was that the man himself had lived out there for 6 months. And then he was going to bring his wife out. And she went out one time and she would not go. It was too barren and too wild. She wouldn't go. So Papa bought the rights. And that's how we come to go to a homestead.
And by this time, all the Indians were out of the area.
Oh, yes.
Right?
Yeah, they were.
And you never saw any buffalo.
No.
No. But tell us a little bit about the wildlife that you saw out there.
Well, on our trip out, Papa loaded early in the morning. He loaded a big wagon, a lumber wagon, full of our possessions we had. And on the top, I remember he stretched a mattress so my mother could lie on the mattress. She was still quite weak, and she had 3 children. I had 2 younger brothers. And we started out early in the morning. And as we drove east by the printer's home, and see Stratton's pasture, there was just pastures. Nothing much was fenced. And if there was a fence, it was just barbed wire, with a wire stretched across 2 posts for our gate. When we came to those places, there was no trail, there was no road, no nothing. You just went the direction that you thought your place.
Just took out across the prairie.
And when we would get to a fence, Papa would stop and open this gate, if it was a gate between 2 pastures, or if it was a fence, he just took the staples out of the fence, stood on the barbed wire, and drove the wagon across. And once, I remember when we were going through I think it was Sinton's pasture. Sinton had a dairy in Colorado Springs. And there was a bunch of wild-eyed cattle that followed us, and Mama was scared to death. And we had a little dog, and the dog got between horses, right under the tongue of the wagon, to keep the animals from getting him. He was afraid too, I guess. And Mama was scared to death, and we kids were too. And when we got to this gate, wire gate, I remember Papa got off. We drove real close to the gate, and Papa got off, and he shooed the cattle back until Mama could drive across. And then we thought we were safe. Back.
And did you see, I know you've talked about it before, jackrabbits?
Yeah. As the day wore on, the team got real tired, and they began to began to come on their shoulders. I don't know whether you know how a horse does when it gets real hot. It begins to sweat, and foam sort of comes on it. And it began to be that way, and the horses were so tired that if a jackrabbit jumped up alongside of the road, or a prairie dog, or a porcupine, they didn't, their ears didn't jump up, and they didn't jump like they were scared. They were too tired.
Mm-hmm.
And then sometimes Papa would let us kids get out and walk behind the wagon.
Mm-hmm.
And we had to be very careful when we did. If we didn't step on cactus, they had all kinds of different cactus there.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess Papa could see them most of the time. A lot of the times they kind of grew in little patches here and there.
How about tumbling weeds?
Yeah, there was tumbleweeds all along the fence rows.
Mm-hmm.
I think this was in the spring of the year, and it was quite cool enough that everybody had a wrap. But Mama packed a lunch. I remember we ate the lunch, and after lunch, after we'd had the lunch, Mama laid on this mattress, and I guess she went to sleep, and I guess we did too, because I can't remember. I remember it seemed like it was long toward the afternoon, and we saw buildings coming to view. And we asked Papa what it was, and he said, that's Franceville, that's a coal mine. And it was the only thing between the springs and our place that we drove by.
Here you are, arriving at the spot you're going to call your home, out there on the prairies in Colorado. And where did you first live when you got out there?
Well, the man that had squatted on the 320 acres 6 months earlier had built a little shack back east where we lived before in Missouri. We would have probably called it a chicken house. But by the stretch of the imagination, you might have said there was 2 rooms there. There was a little partitioned off place that was used for a kitchen. And then there was a place for a bed, like 2 beds, or a bed in a cot, or a bed in something. And of course, that was what Papa did. He unloaded the furniture first, fixed the bed for them for that night, and fixed a place for me. And the boys, because they were boys, they had to sleep on the floor. And then Papa went down to the sheep camp. We didn't have any water at that place. Wasn't any water yet. But there was a sheep camp where a Mexican herder herded about 1,000 sheep. Each night he would get his dog and corral those sheep in a great big enclosure. And they had water there, ample water. And so Papa went down there to haul the water up to the house. And he left Mama there. Of course, she wasn't sick. She wasn't in bed or anything. She fried some meat. And
you had a stove then. Was it there already?
Well, it was an old stove, an old cook stove, as I remember. And I can't remember what they heated it with. A lot of people out there heated with cow chips.
Cow chips?
You know what cow chips are?
I know.
Cow chips are cow dung that is expelled out on the prairie, and because the wind, the atmosphere is so dry and the sun's so hot, it dries to just paper weight. There's no weight at all to it, and it's sort of like grass. And you burn that. It burns up quickly, but it makes a hot fire. And a lot of people use that. Maybe she did too.
And it didn't smell?
No, there wasn't much odor.
Okay.
Not like turf in
right. But you didn't have any wood because there weren't any trees.
No. So I think that's probably what she used. I don't know. But anyway, Papa brought the water back, and she had something ready for us to eat. And I remember we sat down at the table. And as always, it was very primitive. We had a few dishes, I can't remember what. And I don't remember what we sat on or anything, but I remember Papa saying the grace. Bless us, O Lord, in these thy gifts, which we are about to receive. And we began to eat, and it wasn't very long till there was a blood-curdling scream outside. And oh my. Doug was sitting next to Papa, and he vaulted into Papa's lap, and I just jumped close to Mama. And of course, Lee was in a high chair yet, or in a higher seat. And we clung there, and Papa just laughed. I guess it's a coyote. He said he's probably smelled the meat, and he's hungry, and he won't hurt if he doesn't have little ones. He won't bother us. And Mama says, but don't you kids go outside. Wild horses couldn't have pulled us out that night. So we finished our dinner, and that was our first night on the prairie.
Okay, well, let's start talking about some of the neighbors that you met, and how far away was your closest neighbor?
Well, one evening, I guess we had been out there probably a month, or at least 3 or 4 weeks. And the boys come tearing in one day and said, "There's gypsies over the hill." And in the East, in Missouri, when they said gypsies, it was generally people who traded horses and traded mules, and they were of a shady character, and people said they abducted kids. I don't know whether they ever did or not. But anyway, Papa said, "Well, we'll go and see." So he and the boys went over the hill, and as they drew close to these people, there was 2 covered wagons, and several horses, and several cows, and even some chickens, and they were in a covered wagon, and there was smoke coming out of one of the chimney in one of the wagons. And it was a family by the name of Enoch that had driven all the way from Devizes, Kansas to Homestead there. And they had a family of 10.
And they went in that covered wagon?
They had all come in the covered wagon.
Oh, dear.
Some of the boys had ridden horses, and they had 2 wagons. There was one was a good covered wagon, and that was I guess, where they ate. I never really knew much about, but they became some of the best friends we had. They were Seventh-day Adventists.
And did they tell you about their trip out? Did they, was it something different than
Mr. Enoch had been out, and Ralph, he and Mildred were the 2 oldest children. And because they were over 21, they were eligible to homestead too. So they had a whole section of land. He had 320 acres, and Mildred and Ralph had 320. So when they built their dugout, that was what they were going to live in. It was in the ground like a cellar, but I guess it had about 2 feet above the ground, and then a Quonset hut roof. And when they built that, that was their home. That was their really home, and it was a good home too, because
it's probably warm.
And all the members of the girls of the family, they slept in that dugout with the parents, and it was not. It was real dry. It wasn't damp like a cellar in a lot of locations are.
Well, that's Colorado.
And the boys slept in I think it was a tent that the boys had at first. And boys, I don't remember.
How long did you lived there through the summer then before you started to school at all, right? Okay, then when you started to school, how far was the school from your home?
It was about, I guess, a mile. And I had to walk. And walk across the hills.
And about how many students were in the school at the time?
Probably 13, 14 at the time when I went.
All the way from 1st grade through 8th, right?
8 grades. And there was a teacher by the name of Miss Eunice Kennedy, beautiful woman. And as luck would have it, she boarded with us because we were one of the closest ones to the school.
Now, was this the same school that we visited when we were in Colorado? No, it wasn't.
Well, that was a 1-room school.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
And then the one that you visited was what they called the Consolidated School, which consolidated Drennan District, which we went to, with Williams District, which was about
that was built
8
later.
miles down. And at that time, when the students began to go to the Consolidated School, they called it Drennan, still Drennan. But when they began to do that, that was when they instigated the school buses. And I think probably Colorado, and some of those buses were one of the first buses, school buses, that were in the United States.
Who were some of your other friends? Tell briefly about a few of your other friends and how they lived. The Burks?
The Burks were people that came from Kersey, Colorado. And he came as a salesman. He was a windmill salesman. Dempster windmills, I remember they sold. And they had 3 kids. And I believe they had a little baby soon after they came there. They were going to dig a well up close to the road, on the road, where Papa had moved our shack over to the road and had dug a cellar and put another shack on it. So now we had what you might call 4 rooms, with the basement under it. And on this same road, these Burkes were going to build their home. And they drilled for water, very, very deep, never found any water at all. So after a while, they had to abandon their site that they had already begun to build their home and move to down the hill, sort of. And there they found a good vein of water and built their home.
Now, what did your dad do on this piece of property? What did he grow? Could you have a garden?
Well, in order to prove up or for the land to become yours, you had to fence it. You had to plow a certain number of acres, and you had to plant the kind of crops that were adaptable to that climate. It was a mistake that they found later on because it became part of the Dust Bowl. The wind and the rain and the sand eroded so badly, and it kept many crops. One time we had beans up so high, ready to bloom and have beans on them. Now this is commercial beans, not beans that you eat, but commercial beans. And we had a sandstorm, literally. You couldn't see anything but the ground. It just cut it off. And the sand was coarse. When you drove along in the car and the sand hit your windshield and headlights, they would be pitted from the sand.
Do you remember being in these dust storms?
Yeah, I remember that. I remember going with Papa on the big wagon along a field. I guess it was most of the time it was from the southwest, along the upper side, and the wind blowing so fiercely that we could hardly see the team that we were driving, and much less open your eyes to see it.
Okay, now you went to school during the day, and what did you do with your spare time in the evenings and weekends and so forth?
Well, like I told you, the school teacher boarded with us, so we always had to get our lessons. And outside of that, we didn't do much. There was nothing demanded of us. We had no work, no chores or anything. We were just like the jackrabbits and the prairie dogs. We were just free. And we did play.
And did you have to work hard? And did you make good grades in school?
Made good grades in school. And in spite of her teaching 8 grades, I thought she was very thorough. And she treated everybody good. Everybody loved Eunice Kennedy.
And you felt that you got a good basic education?
I did.
Okay. Did you have parties?
Yeah, the school was the center of the community. So whenever there was like a Christmas or a box supper, it was always held at the school.
What's a box supper?
That's when the young women of the neighborhood fix boxes of food and take it to the auction. And the boys in the community bid for those. And if teachers' boxes there, she was very popular. Hers boxes generally bid up to the highest one. And some of the other boys would bid it up high.
She was a single lady.
Yeah, she was a single lady. And one time my mother and the teacher made a little pact that they would fool the boys. They fixed up 2 boxes, and they were very beautiful boxes. They were not boxes, they were fancy. And they put good food in both of them. And they put my name on the fanciest one and her name on the other. But she carried the one not so fancy, and I carried the fancy one when we went in. I was just a kid, and I was so proud and so happy to get in on a secret with a teacher like that. So the bidding started, and sure enough, there was some of the boys that were bidding it up higher and higher, and finally they sold it. And some guy that hadn't intended, he had a girlfriend with him, hadn't intended buying it, but it got knocked off to him. So he bought the box. And then I was feeling pretty bad because I was watching his face and wondering what he'd say when he saw my name in there. And you should have seen his face.
Were you about 10 or 11 years old?
Well, it was before Mom was gone, so it had to be I was 11.
Right.
So, but he was really a gentleman, and he was so nonplussed, and his sweetheart was looking at him. I guess she was mad at him for buying somebody else's box too. And he looked up and he said, Mrs. Conran, I think I bought your daughter's box, and I wish you'd do the honor to come with me and my fiance to eat. Well, it was a time that I felt like I was king of the roost. I went over with them and ate and thought I was really one of the big people. And that wasn't all. The dancing started after the box was over. And he came over and he said to his girlfriend, he said, I guess I'll have to dance a dance with my second girlfriend. And he took me out for my first waltz.
Now, how was your mom feeling by this time?
She was really in good spirits, and she and Dad danced the schottische.
And tell us about what she did, her piano teaching.
Well, she had been an accomplished musician, and I don't know how they got the organ. It wasn't a piano, it was an organ. Whether they had it sent from Missouri or whether we bought another one. I can't remember how we got it. But she gave music lessons to the girls around in the neighborhood.
And to you?
At my house, and to me.
Mm-hmm.
And later on, then she had a class at Ellicott. That was another little school that was about 8 miles from us. And we would drive there on certain afternoons in the summertime. And I would often go with her. And then she had 3.
Okay.
Had you asked me already?
No, I want to ask you how long you lived out there on the prairie on that piece of squatting property.
Well, with my mother, as long as she lived, she died in 1915, so this had to be before 1915.
What year did you move out there to the
1911,
Colorado?
the spring of 1911,
Okay.
we went out there.
Mm-hmm.
And then she was feeling pretty good the first couple of years, and some of her relatives came out. Her mother never got to come, but her father did after her mother's death. And then her uncle, youngest brother, came. Her sister came, and had to go right back.
Oh, I remember you telling about that. The altitude got to her, didn't it?
This was before we ever went out to the farm, and we had gone to school.
Mm-hmm.
My brother and I had gone to school, and Mama promised us Uncle Gardner would be there. And
so excited, huh?
And we were so happy to come home, and we raced home after school, and Mama was in tears, and the dishes were still on the table, and she said that Uncle Gardner became so short of breath, he had heart trouble, and they had to stay until afternoon for them to get a train to go back to East, but they had come with a closed cab out to the house, and they had eaten dinner, and then they had just left about half hour before we got home.
Mm-hmm. I see a book in your hand, and I think that we probably will be able to read it on this.
It's good. It's
yeah, and the name of it is?
I Have Words to Spend.
Okay, this speaks well for your interview. I think I can't hardly get you slowed down with all these words you have to spend.
Well, I do, and I love to talk about it. It was such a wonderful experience, and I loved it, and I like to share it with my kids.
And this kid that is asking for this interview wants to share it with a lot more kids, you know.
Oh, yeah.
So you have anything to say to those little kids?
Oh, those are Sheila's kids.
Sheila's class.
Sheila's class. I'd love to see every one of them. I'd love to see them. I know they must be very special because she speaks of them as though they are special.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure they love her. We all do.
I think so.
I know.
Yeah. Okay, you then about 1914, was it, you moved into Colorado Springs?
Well, it was after one of my aunts came out, and she brought her son. And they came out to the farm and stayed with us a couple of, I guess a week maybe. And then my mother and I went back into Colorado Springs and got a room.
She was feeling pretty bad by then?
No, she was feeling pretty good and was happy that Aunt Callie was there. And we went in there, and I remember it was a fun time. I can't remember how long we stayed in there. We lived with a Grandma Bancroft, an old lady. And then Aunt Callie went home, and one night I woke up and Mama was having trouble, I guess, breathing and talking. And she said, little sister, run across the street and call the doctor. And I did.
Okay, Mom, let's wait for that, okay? I remember you telling about that she was such a strong-willed person and disliked drinking so much.
Oh, yes, she did.
Tell about the guys coming home drunk.
Our room was real close to the sidewalk, real close. And we had no air conditioning, so we raised the windows to keep cool at night. And the Colorado Springs had been voted dry. There was no liquor supposed to be in Colorado Springs. But there was several people that had to have the liquor, so they established a little, at the edge of town, they called it Ramona. And there's where the tipsters went at night to get their beer and their drinks. And then about 2 o'clock in the morning, they'd come staggering by our place a lot of times, going home or going somewhere else. And I remember many nights, Mama just got up out of bed and went and closed the windows. And of course, we didn't turn on a light or anything. And in about a half hour, they were all gone by, and we went back to bed.
But it did make her very angry, right?
Oh, she didn't like the drink. She was a teetotaler.
Yeah. And wasn't that around the time that women got the right to vote?
Yeah, women were.
That was when
yes, it was.
The women suffragettes were very active.
Yeah. While we were out there, I can't remember if it was before Mama died or right after. I mean, just before or just after she died. That women, I guess we could find that out in the
right. But I know it was the western states, maybe Wyoming, that was the first state that got where women got the right to vote, and then maybe Colorado was second.
And I think she's when she felt well, I think she campaigned some for women's rights.
Who was that? Elizabeth Cady Stanton? That was active then, or who was that?
Well, Carrie Nation was doing
Carrie Nation. Oh yeah, and she was really a big supporter of hers. Okay, then you and she lived there how long?
I think only about 2 or 3 weeks, but anyway, she had this hemorrhage, and of course that was. She thought she was going to die, I guess, that night, and so she called. I guess they called. I don't know how they got word to Papa. We didn't have any phone.
Good morning, Mom.
Good morning, Lois.
Here we are starting again on the 18th of March, the day after St. Patrick's Day. And it's a little bit cloudy out there, but I think we're going to have enough light, at least I hope so. We were kind of finishing up yesterday about the time of your mother's death, just before that, when you were living in town with her and the boys and Grandpa were out on the ranch. And you told about that she sent you across the street to call the doctor, and she thought she was dying. So after that,
they got word to Papa some way, and he came and got us and took us back to the homestead. And we stayed there, I guess, another 6 months or maybe longer than that. We had a school teacher that wasn't pleasing the school board. It seemed like she didn't keep order, and they thought she just wasn't any good, so they asked her to resign. So she was boarding with us. So Mama said, well, the kids will never make their grades if they have to change schools or have a different teacher now. And I think when she leaves us, I'll take the children and go to town and enter them in a town school, which she did. And the teacher, the head boarded with us again and got a school in the city. Then Doug took the measles, and she took the measles from the children, and she never got over them.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
And she didn't die until in February that next year.
What year was that?
1915. She died on the 22nd of February, 1915. And
now, how long after she died? I know she's buried in Colorado Springs, and we have visited her grave. How long after her death did you go back to Missouri?
We went back that summer on a visit. We had planned to go back. Of course, she was sick, and I think she probably couldn't have gone. But we bought a car. Papa had a Willys Knight, which is an Overland Willys Knight. It's I guess it's a Chevrolet. It was a General Motors car, I think. And then we drove cross country. It was a thrill.
Now, how did you wind up in Glasgow, Missouri?
When we moved back, after he proved up on the place and sold the place, we came back to my grandmother's in Jonesburg. And there at church, we met a boy that he had gone to school with. And he said, I thought you lived in Colorado. And he says, I did, but I lost my wife back there. And I moved back here. I want to get the kids in a Catholic school. So he says, why don't you come to Glasgow? We're building a new one. Ours burned down, and we're in the process of building a new one. So that's why we came to Glasgow.
Mm-hmm. And how long after you moved to Glasgow did you meet my dad?
I went to the 2 years at St. Mary's, and then that's all they had was 2-year high school. I graduated from the 10th grade at St. Mary's, and I went out to the high school 1 year, and I met Daddy. And we intended to be married. I was 19 years old, and we intended to be married then at Christmas time. And his father was killed in October. Fell off the horse, or the horse stumbled and fell off, and he broke his neck. So that stopped that. And I didn't get married then until the next April. Mm-hmm. We went to St. Louis to be married because his mother didn't want us to have a big to-do in Glasgow because they were still in mourning. All the women of the family had to wear black dresses for a year. All the men had to wear a black band around their arms for a year. So we went to St. Louis and was married by John's brother, who was a priest.
And then you moved in with the Westhues family to begin with.
I did. John's brother, younger brother, which was just a year older than I was. And we moved with them for that summer while our house was being built up on the hill. John had contracted with his father before his father's death to buy 100 acres of land. And he cut the logs and sawed the lumber from those logs, and that's what our house was constructed of. Mm-hmm. It was a bungalow, pretty house, 6-room home, and we had modern conveniences, and that was unusual in those days. That was 1922.
The first running water in the area, right? Especially in the farming
water
community.
In the bathroom, and
how much property did you have? How many acres did you have?
100 acres. Okay. That's what he bought.
And he had, during his lifetime, he raised almost anything and everything on that farm.
Mm-hmm. He always said that it should not have been cultivated farm, that it was more suited to graze cattle and livestock and things because it was rough, but hilly, just like all the land around Glasgow.
Well, then you were a young couple in love, and you know what happens next.
Yeah, that's right.
So, okay, start out and just very briefly tell just a little bit about the birth of each child. You can be a little bit more than brief when you get to the fourth one.
Now the Lord. Well, just about all I can say is that we married in 1922, and from 1922 until 32, that was 10 years, I had 5 children. So it had to be pretty brief. Each one didn't get much attention.
So tell a little bit about, tell the names of your children.
The oldest child we named for his father, John Jr. The second was James Francis, from my uncle in St. Louis. And the third was Eugene Joseph.
And these 3 were born one right after the other almost.
Mm-hmm. And then 4 years later, we had a little girl, and this, by the way, was the 4th child. And she was our sister baby and a real favorite, and the boys petted her, and everybody was crazy about Dolores. So we named her Dolores Marie. Then 3 years later, I said right away, I want to have another little girl because I want her to have a sister. I didn't have a sister. So 3 years later, we had another little girl. Her name was Margie Louise. And then the next 10 years we spent in the Depression, because that was the beginning of the Depression. And the hard times, hard work, not much time for the kids. And the kids grew up, were growing up all that time. I was too busy to know whether I was happy or not, but I think they were. I don't think they ever felt like they were very underprivileged or anything, even though now when you read history books, they say they were.
Now, You want to talk about the Depression a little bit and the difficulties?
Well, it was hard. People didn't have money. I don't know. They called this a recession, but people still have money. And there was no money to be had. You didn't make any money. You couldn't spend any money. On a farm, you never had to worry about food. We always had plenty of food, but we didn't have money. So when the kids asked for a nickel or a tablet, sometimes we didn't have it.
They were going to parochial school at the time, right?
Going to a parochial school, and that is another saving too. They're very saving with paper and everything. And I remember we used to save advertisements that we got that were just written on one side, and we saved those for the kids to do their homework on the back side.
I'm going to take a. All right. You were talking about the Depression. So we had a lot to eat though because we were on the farm, right?
That's right. We always had plenty to eat. We didn't have very good cars.
Well, just before the Depression, you bought a new car, right?
Yeah.
First new car you ever had.
That's right. We bought a new Chevrolet, and we had to trade it in for a truck to deliver the coal at a $9 a place because we had to have some way to survive the Depression. Many people went on WPA, and many farmers were destitute and had to. But John Wooten,
What's WPA? I know what it is, but you have to tell.
you see, what was the Workers Program Association? I can't remember. It was a governmental organization to give poor people and people who had lost jobs employment, so they get a little money.
Was poverty? Was the P for poverty?
It might have been. I can't remember what it
We'll have
meant.
to look that up too. We should have looked it up before we made the film.
Right. But Daddy wouldn't go on it. He said no. He said they gave out materials to make mattresses for people that poor people that couldn't afford to buy a new mattress or anything. And he said, I wanted to go. I wanted to go and get the material and go with the bunch to the schoolhouse to make the mattress. And he said no. He said, I slept on a straw tick when I was a boy and it didn't hurt me. So he wouldn't go.
So we slept on straw
No,
ticks.
you didn't.
No, we ate beans and potatoes a lot, though. I remember that
Beans and
with
potatoes
ham.
and tomatoes.
And
Things that we could grow on the place.
right. And when we butchered a hog, we had pork.
That's right. Very, very little red meat. We had chicken and pork. Not fish because it was too dry and we were just not close to the river.
The summer of the drought, the big drought. Tell us about that and how we moved out onto the lawns.
That was an added, I guess that was an added cross that we had in 1934 and 36. We had a serious drought and it was so hot. We had no air conditioning, nobody did. So John moved 2 double beds out into the lawn. And the boys slept crosswise on the lawn under one tree, and John and I slept in the other bed with Dolores between us, Margie between us, and Dolores was sleeping in the crib.
No bugs,
No bugs, no flies, no snakes, no nothing. Just 2 of them.
grasshoppers.
That they had chintz bugs. They attacked the crops. Well, of course, they dried up, but what there was there, they destroyed everything. And they used to dig a big ditch and put poison oil in the bottom of the ditch and drag a log or something in the bottom of the ditch. And the chintz bugs would fall down in that oil.
Now, one thing I remember was when you took us down to the creek because we didn't have any water, and took us down there to take a bath in the creek water. And of course, we were little kids and really positive about everything, so that was fun, even though it was hardship.
And another makeshift thing is that my sister-in-law we had power washing, as I told you before, we had a modern home. So we had a modern washer, and no dryer, just a washer. But it was powered by a gasoline engine, and my sister-in-law's washing machine engine went out. And our washing machine mechanic said or something happened. So we decided, I said, well, I'll see if John will take our motor and put on your machine. I didn't have a little baby at that time. She did. So each week, twice a week, we would load everything up in the car and go over to my sister-in-law's house, and we'd wash together.
And the kids played.
And the kids played.
Yeah.
And then sometimes we would have the whole lines full and the fences full and everything, and all the kids' clothes. But they had a good time, and we did too.
Yeah, I remember the Christmases that we had with those same cousins. And our dads would get together with the sleigh
That's right.
and take us all sleigh riding on a big sleigh.
Went to midnight mass.
Yeah. Right. They were fun days.
Well, I'm glad you remember them as fun, because I didn't feel bad. Maybe other people felt sorry for us, but I never did. Everybody else was in the same boat, so we just had fun. Much good.
Okay, what comes next?
Well, music.
Okay, Mom.
Mm-hmm.
Here we are back in about 1935. And you had 5 children, right?
That's right.
And all your children were in school by 1937. And then through the Depression and so forth, you know, the kids were going to school.
That's the first 5.
The first 5, right.
Then in 1944, we got a surprise.
44, excuse me. Mm-hmm.
First, Buddy was the first break in the family, because the war started. And even before the war started, there was they called it a NYA, National Youth Organization, where boys could get training to become mechanics or whatever. And so he left to go to Fulton to NYA. And then, before he was there very long, he was drafted and sent to Europe. And we wrote and told him we had a surprise for him, but we didn't tell him what. So he was one of the unfortunate people that did not have a furlough. He had to go across before he was a flyer. And then in 1944, we had a new baby, a little boy. And
he was our little bonus, right?
He was our little bonus, and he was brought sunshine into the life of boys. Tried to make him tough, and the girls tried to make him cute. And
he said he had 3 mothers.
He had 3 mothers, that's what y'all said. But he was a good boy, and he was really a godsend to the home, because at that time the boys were all being sent overseas or being drafted, or we thought they were going to be. And so he was our light sunshine.
Okay, that was 44, and that's about the time when everybody started getting married.
Well, everybody started going with boyfriends and girlfriends.
Mm-hmm.
So for the next, it went to 54, or even longer than that, before 57, really, because Buddy was away from home. Why, we went a merry-go-round with the makeups and the breakups and the going here and the going here, and the girls working in Kansas City, and the boys.
And I remember the times when the guys were in service a lot, and of course we were young, and we didn't have any way to go to dances, so you would just take us to the dances, and take Kenny with us.
Mm-hmm.
And he was a little baby, and we put him in the middle of the table, let him sleep at the dance. Remember that?
He'd be sleeping, and when the dance was finished and everybody clapped, he would clap too.
Yeah. So then, the boys went to the Army. Buddy was in the Air Force.
And he was in the Ordnance.
Right.
In
Jean
Korea.
went to Korea. Jim went to Hawaii and played baseball and basketball.
Mm-hmm.
And then I moved to Kansas City about that time.
And
okay, Dolores and Margie both were working in Glasgow for a few years before taking off for Kansas City.
they worked at the bank. Both the girls worked at the bank. Dolores worked at the Corps of Engineers. When she went to Kansas City, she went to the Corps of Engineers, and she got a job there. They came home often, all the children did, and the two, Jean and Jim, were not drafted until they were not even in service a year, I think, until they were out.
Discharged,
But Buddy was in there the full length of time and came home and was only home a short time to into China.
So the years went on, and you had a grandchild. What year was Meg born?
In August 1954.
Your first grandchild.
I thought I never was going to have any grandchildren. And then it was 3 years before I had any more. And then boom, 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 they all
Okay, Jimmy was next.
Jimmy, and then Doug, and then Jeff, then Karen, then Debbie, then Janie. And who comes next?
Sheila. Sheila's next.
Oh, that's right. Janie, Sheila.
And then
Yeah. Well,
Christy.
then Mike.
Oh, Mike came before.
No, Mike
Is after Sheila, right?
And yeah, now I almost have to have a list to find out.
Then the other three are real close.
Yeah,
Christy,
there's 3 girls born the same year.
Christy, Judy, and Sandy.
That's right.
Yeah, they're
Christy,
real close.
Judy, and Sandy were born in 1963.
Must be 63.
Then in 65, we had Joey
And Kevin.
and Kevin.
Right at the same
Joey
time.
changed our lives forever. You don't want to say.
Yeah. Well, don't have
And
to.
then Buddy, I didn't say Jonna.
Oh gosh. Okay,
I
Jonna
guess
comes
Jonna,
right with Jimmy.
Yeah, Jonna and Jimmy were only 3 days apart.
Right.
And then Buddy had another little girl, Becky. And Buddy said at that time, if that Dolores would have stayed off the scene, I would have had the oldest and the youngest grandchild. But Dolores didn't stay off the scene. She had Randy.
I had a bonus too.
She had a bonus too. So he stayed the youngest grandchild for how many years?
Well, he's now 25 and Jonathan's 9, so 16 years.
16 years. Randy was the baby grandchild. And then my bonus, had a little boy. He married and was living in Canada with his wife, and he had a little boy, John.
Who is now 9 years old.
He's 9 years old. He's down here with us in Florida.
Right.
And we're having a good time. We've been staying over with him, and now we're over with Mom making a video for Sheila.
Well, we've kind of skimmed the surface on these years, but and we could go on and on. Would you like to say a few more words about Dad? Because we didn't even talk about when you lost him. When we lost him.
I did. That was a big thing too, because Dad was always in the background. He worked, and he was a good provider and a disciplinarian when I couldn't. But he was always in the background. He never seemed like he asserted himself much.
But what did you call him?
What? Rock of Gibraltar.
Okay.
Because that's what he was to all of us. He was steady as a clock. And we depended on him, and it wasn't until 1968 that he really began to break. And I was out east, and when I came home, I noticed that he really looked bad, and I asked him about it. He said he'd been feeling bad, and then from then on, he had operations and in and out of the hospital. But he stayed strong. He wanted to get better. He wouldn't give up.
Okay, I'm sorry I interrupted you, but you were talking about Daddy. And when he was, he got sick, but then he got well again.
No, he didn't get well.
Oh, you mean when he really got down?
In 1968, when he had his first operation. From then on, he was in and out of the hospital. Margie had moved to the east. Dolores was living in the east. And the boys were living in their own homes. Everybody had their own home. There wasn't anybody at home but me. And it was for the last 2 years of his life, I took care of him. And then Buddy,
John Jr.
John Jr., the oldest boy. First, in 1974, his daughter was 20 years old. And she was killed in an auto accident as she went to work. And I don't think he ever recovered from that, because in 2 years later,
Such a
almost,
shock to all of us.
he died. So into every life, rain must come, I guess, and that sobered all of us. And during in those years too, and when we were raising the children and everything, we lost my father. It brought us to have us all together after Mama died. And then he married a beautiful woman who became my stepmother, and she also died. The following year, she was killed in an auto accident. So it was a tragic
But you are
time.
thankful that your grandchildren from Buddy's children are still in touch with you and
That's right.
stayed close, and his ex-wife with,
She was married.
his widow with her
She was
husband.
married again. She had 3 girls, but she was married again to a real good man, and they live not too far from me now. And he's been good for the family.
Okay, and now we are visiting each other.
Now we're in Florida. I'm at Dolores and Rudy's, and I spent a week with Rudy's mom, which we've done for several years. It's a gift from Rudy and Dolores to their 2 moms.
That's Oma.
And that's Oma. And she went home, and Rudy's gone to New Jersey right now. So Dolores is by herself, and I've been staying with Ken some, and his Jonathan and Annette, and now I'm with Dolores. And I'm going home Friday. And my vacation kind of turned inside out. I was going to come down here for a month, and then had to shorten it out to about 10 days.
Do you want to give any message to Sheila's children while you're talking on this, because she'll be the one to use it first?
Well, I would rather see Sheila. I would love to see Sheila. I always love to see Sheila. She always makes me smile, always makes me feel I'm very special. I wonder if she does you too. I'll bet she does.
You mean the children?
I bet she knows every one of your names, and you think you're just really something special. And I know you are to her too.
Okay, so this has been fun. I hope it turns out halfway decent, and I know that you think you can do a better job, Sheila, but sorry about that. Did the best I can.
You didn't have any more fun at it than we did you?
Well, we had fun because Sheila and I did it together with Oma.
Yeah. That was fun too.
So anyhow, we stayed inside because it's kind of noisy outside with the wind and all the birds chirping and children screaming, so we stayed in the apartment to get this done. So bye-bye, and we'll sign off.
Hoping to see you. Bye-bye. They said there was a barn in the swimming pool. You know, Evie, she is just really happy out there because there's cats and dogs she can have. It's country, you know, and she can have them. And she loves it. What are you filming now? Just me reading the book?
No, I'm just looking at an apartment. This is the 19th, the following day. And what are you reading, Mom?
Jewel.
What do you think of it?
It's a wonderful book.
But I just caught her skipping off to the end. She's cheating.
Well, I skipped through here.
Oh, wait. We're now waiting for Ken, Annette, and Jonathan to return from their little trip to Venice, where they plan to get some fossilized shark's teeth. They took the big scoop that Randy used to use and took off. It turned out to be a pretty nice day after all. So now we have dinner just about prepared for them. We're going to have a feast of crab claws tonight. And Kenny and Jonathan say they're going to crack them for us. We're going to have them cold for a while, then we're going to steam some and eat them hot. And they must be having a good day because it's getting kind of late, unless they got caught in a traffic jam, which Kenny hates. Mom, I have the camera on you now. So, do you think Kenny got caught in a traffic jam?
Well, I hope he didn't, because
He gets out of sorts, doesn't he?
Oh, yeah, he hates it so bad.
Yeah.
He asked you to drive last night, didn't
He kind of wanted me to, but then we didn't have bad traffic when we went last night. And we had a good time last night. You want to tell them about it?
We went to the Melting Pot, a fondue place. And it was really different than I'd ever been before. I never imagined anything like it. It took us how long to eat dinner?
2.5 hours, I think we sat there.
2.5 hours. And you get salad first, and what did we have first?
Well, first we had appetizers. What did we eat for appetizers? Was it vegetables and
No,
fondue?
we had melted cheese and
Oh yeah, sure. We had cheddar cheese fondue.
little cups of little pieces of fruit and vegetables and bread. And we took them on long forks and put them in fondue and then ate them. And they were just delicious. And after you'd be surprised how I thought that the whole big pot was full of cheese. And it would take us all night to finish the cheese. I wondered how we were going to eat anything else, but it didn't. There was 5 of us eating, and it didn't take us very long.
Well, it was a pot that was wide on the top, and got very narrow at the bottom, so it was bigger than it looked like it was.
A liner in it.
Right.
And anyway, then the next course was the salad, and that was really delicious. It was a chef salad, and it had everything the chef salad should have in it. It was all crisp and good. Then they brought
combinations.
Combination that we
2 combinations for 2.
Yeah, and we had bouillon in one pot that was hot, and we had
peanut
oil in the other.
Peanut oil.
Peanut oil in the other. And then there was dips. A number of dips and batters. And you had fresh mushrooms, or you had a piece of salmon, or you had a piece of chicken. Or there was a beef on there too, and
vegetables of all kinds,
and squash. They just had everything on there. And when you dipped it in that batter and heated those mushrooms, they were so delicious. I couldn't get enough of them. And it took us a long, long time to eat that. Then we had chocolate fondue.
It was white chocolate with, was it Kahlua?
That's right. And Jonathan was crazy about that. He was the one that said that's what we should have. Well, it was too rich, really, but it was really, really good. And you dipped angel food cake or fruit, strawberries or cherries or something like that in it and ate it. And it was really good. But it took us 2.5 hours, and you were not over full. You didn't feel like you'd eaten too much.
We didn't drink too much either.
No.
We just had a good time.
Yeah, we just had a good time.
Yeah, and tonight we're going to have a good time too. All right, here we are out on the deck, and tell me what's going on here. You want to tell me, Jonathan?
Clam shells smashing.
Okay, let me hear you smash it. Oh my God.
Good, done.
This is stone crab claws we're having tonight. So let's take them inside now. Hello there.
Hello?
What's your name?
Something must be one yellow.
Okay. It's nice to have you visiting down in Sarasota. Where'd you go today, Jonathan?
Beach condominium.
What was your favorite?
Camera.
Okay, and you bought Grandma what?
I hated shopping.
Mom, what'd you do today?
Well, you were very
Is that all? Okay. Well, okay, what'd you do today, Mom?
It's TV, just nothing, uncomfortable thing.
That's okay. Okay, yeah, and we did the wash. Okay, Kenny? Hello, Kenny. Hello, little brother.
Hello, big sister. Thank you for making us a wonderful meal.
Oh, it's been nice having you here. And I hope we're going to have some more fun. You're going to be here tomorrow.
The only thing crabby about the dinner was the food.
Okay, that was a good remark. Guess what we're doing today? Can you tell we're taking pictures today? Mom is leaving. But I've got the sun behind me. I think I'm in better shape. Isn't that,
I
that's
think
an
true. I think
excellent
I'm
picture.
taking it the wrong direction.
Yeah, that's an excellent
What
picture
do
of
you-
mother. Oh, my goodness.
Take a picture from that direction as well.
Okay, I will do that.
Okay. I always had that silly laugh. There's my nephew. Jonathan, you have a shadow on your face.
I do?
Yes, move a little bit, okay? There, that's better. Well, somebody has to say something.
Say something. Looks like you're getting ready to do a ballet. Da-da-da-da-da. Oh,
Okay, where did you
Mom.
go?
Tell me what you've been doing, Jonathan.
Oh, well, no problem today. Where do you go? Nothing.
No, I know this day you haven't done
Oh,
anything.
well.
Stand in front of her. Here. I stand behind Grandma, then she's in circle.
Oh, that's, well, yeah, that's good now. You were kind of like you were growing out of your mother's head.
I got John close now.
Put your hands down, Pumpkin.
It's a good day to come, and it's a good day to go, isn't it?
All right. I think
There
that's
they
good.
are. Okay, can I get in on something?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I,
Did you see us?
what'd you tell me to push?
That. Let me see,
But I
what
didn't-
does it
I
say
didn't
in
hear
here?
anything.
No, you don't have to hear. It's recording.
Oh, it
Okay.
is recorded.
Okay, we're gonna have the floor here, I think.
There they,
I've done that.
I'm
plenty of
sorry,
times.
it's,
Annette, come on over.
No, he's not.
Get into the picture.
there she goes.
You just go do a little dance with your grandma.
Yeah, we'll see you in July. And it's been fun. It went kind of short.
Am I about to step off the back?
No.
Oh, here, how do you shut this damn thing off, Dolores? The red button?
Same red button.